It started with the sound of rain tapping softly against my car window, the kind of steady rhythm that always seemed to match my mood when I was deep in thought. I sat there in the driveway of the house I once cleaned every Saturday for 5 years straight, staring at the familiar red bricks, the polished white door, and the front porch light that used to flicker when I walked past it. Back then, I was the help. The girl who knew when to show up, when to disappear, and when to smile politely even as they whispered things that reminded me I didn't belong. And yet here I was 10 years later, sitting in that same driveway, not as a babysitter, not as an employee, but as the owner. It was almost poetic how things had come full circle. But the story of how I got here, of how I locked her out of what used to be her house, began long before the ink dried on the deed. It started with a phone call that came out of nowhere one spring morning. "Camille, darling." The voice on the other end was cheerful, almost too familiar. "It's Mrs. Warren. You remember me, right? You used to help us with the kids when they were little." How could I forget? The Warrens were the kind of family who smiled for Christmas cards while ignoring the people who made their perfect life possible. Mr. Warren worked in real estate, and Mrs. Warren, Abigail, was the queen of charity luncheons. I was 19 when I first started working for them. They lived in a house that felt like it came straight out of a magazine, and I used to imagine what it would be like to belong somewhere like that. But even at 19, I knew the looks, the pauses, the moments when their friends asked if I was with the agency, or one of those girls from the community center. Now years later, her voice still had that same sugar-coated tone, like she was doing me a favor by calling. "I heard you're back in town. That's wonderful. I actually have a little situation. My daughter just had twins, and she's desperate for a reliable sitter." I told her I knew someone who was just perfect. Perfect. The word hit differently when you knew what it really meant. Perfect meant quiet. It meant obedient. It meant someone who knew her place. I smiled even though she couldn't see it. "I'm actually quite busy these days," I said carefully. "Oh, nonsense," she laughed. "You were always so good with the children. Besides, you'll be staying right here, in the house I paid for. You'll babysit for Emily, won't you? You owe me that much, dear." Owe her? That was the part that made my chest tighten. Owe her for what? For underpaying me, for making me use the back door even when it rained, for letting her friends assume I was some charity case? I said nothing for a long moment. Then something in me, something calm and quiet, decided to say yes. "Sure," I said softly. "I'll babysit." The next few days moved like a slow storm gathering strength. I met Emily, her daughter, who was polite but clearly inherited her mother's superiority. She gave me a tight smile when I arrived and barely looked at me as she handed over a long list of rules. I recognized the tone, the same patronizing sweetness, the same unspoken message. "You work for us." But what they didn't know was that I had been working for myself for a long time now. After leaving their house years ago, I put myself through school, graduated in property law, and started investing in undervalued homes. One of those homes, ironically, was the one they had nearly lost years later in foreclosure. When it went up for sale, I bought it through a quiet LLC, my LLC. They never even realized who the new owner was. So when I showed up at the Warrens' home that week, the irony burned like sunlight through fog. Every wall, every door, every inch of space they thought they still owned, it all belonged to me. Babysitting wasn't really about the kids for me. It was about closure, about standing in the same kitchen where I used to scrub the counters, and now feeling the power shift in every breath I took. Abigail stopped by that Friday, wearing her usual pearls and perfume, acting like she was inspecting her property. "So glad you could help, Camille. You're such a reliable girl," she said, looking around like a queen checking her estate. I nodded. "I do what I can." She smirked. "Well, don't get too comfortable. This house might be under Emily's name soon, and we'll be making a few changes. You'll still have a place here, just not in charge of anything." It was fascinating. How people like her could never imagine you growing beyond what they decided you were. I wanted to tell her right then that she wasn't standing in her daughter's house anymore. But I didn't. I waited. The moment came that Sunday evening. She had planned to host one of her famous charity teas, inviting all her old friends, the same ones who once ignored me like I was invisible. Emily had left early that morning with her husband, leaving the house to me and the twins. I played with the babies, listened to music, and watched the time tick closer to 5. Then I saw her car pulling into the driveway, sleek, white, and expensive. She got out, holding her phone, probably already thinking about the compliments she'd get for her generosity. But when she tried to open the door, it didn't budge. She frowned, jiggled the handle, knocked, then tried again. I watched from the upstairs window as she tapped her phone in frustration. The locks were digital now, the ones I had installed. My system. My account. My house. After a few minutes, she called Emily, pacing on the porch. I could almost hear her sharp voice from here. Then she called me. Camille. Something's wrong with the locks. I can't get in. Can you open it remotely? I took a slow breath and pressed the phone to my ear. Oh, Mrs. Warren. I'm afraid you can't come in right now. What do you mean? Her tone was clipped, confused. I walked to the front door and looked through the glass. This is my house, I said softly. I bought it last year. You told me I'd babysit in the house you paid for, but you don't own it anymore. I don't. Her face froze. You're joking. I'm not. Maybe you should check the deed. She started shouting, about respect, about betrayal, about how I was ungrateful. But her voice cracked in the middle, like she knew she was losing control of something she'd taken for granted her whole life. The rain started again, just like that first day I sat in my car outside, and I watched it soak through her perfect curls and designer blouse. She slammed her hands against the glass once before turning away, humiliated. I didn't open the door. Not that night. Not ever again for her. That was the day I learned that justice doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes it's quiet. A simple moment when the world finally balances itself out. When the people who treated you like you were invisible realize you were always watching, always learning, always growing stronger. The next week, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Abigail Warren had been locked out of her own former house. Her daughter was furious, embarrassed. They called it cruel. I called it fair. Because people like them never remember what they did to make someone stop forgiving them. They remember only the moment they lost control. As for me, I didn't stay there forever. The house was a symbol, not a home. A statement that I could build something bigger than their approval. I sold it months later and donated part of the profit to a local fund supporting Black women entrepreneurs. Women like me who were told to stay small, quiet, and grateful. Every now and then, I drive past that street again. The new owners painted the shutters, added flowers by the walkway. It looks different now, lighter somehow. I smile when I see it. Not because I miss it, but because I know that sometimes, revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting free. So when people ask why I did it, why I locked her out instead of forgiving her, I just say this. Some doors were never meant to open for people who spent their lives closing them on others.